All right, we are ready for Proverbs 3 and 4 in our study this morning. And we'll get to our questions here in just a moment. Let's review where we've been with the first two chapters of Proverbs. What was Proverbs 1 about? All right, has to do with what wisdom will and will not do. Chapter 2, what was it about? Wisdom must be sought. You seek after it like mining for treasures. And so we seek after wisdom. Go after it is the point in Proverbs chapter 2. All right, let's look at our outline of the book as we have been making our way starting last week through the book of Proverbs. Chapters 1 to 9, if you have not done a serious study of Proverbs before, and you think all chapters of Proverbs are the same, then you'll be in for a little bit of surprise in the first 9 chapters in relation to 10 to 31. Chapters 1 through 9 deal with wisdom. Generally, it personifies wisdom as a woman who is standing at her banquet and her feast, and she's offering you things. As opposed to the immoral woman that we'll see starting next week in chapters 5, 6, and 7. But she's standing here offering wisdom. She's offering you peace. She's offering you longevity of life. She's offering you health. She's making various offers throughout chapters 1 through 9. So chapters 1 to 9 deal with wisdom and the nature of wisdom. What wisdom will do. 10 to 31 is just miscellaneous proverbs that are just bunched together, and we'll get to that in chapter 10 a little bit later. All right, let's go to our questions for today now. Chapter 3, question number 1. Chapter 3 is about the value of wisdom. I call it the value of wisdom. It is saying here in chapter 3 that wisdom is of value to you. And here is the value that it has. So let's go now with that in mind to question number 1. Make a list of some things you see in chapter 3 that tells us the benefits of wisdom. All right, there are rewards. All right. Much like a good salesperson will do, they tell you the value, what this product will do for you. This is why you need this product. You need it because of its value and its benefit. If the salesperson said it is of no value, it won't do anything for you. It is of no benefit to you, but we'd like to sell it to you anyway, you're not going to buy it, are you? You buy it because of the value that it has. So I'm going to seek wisdom, chapter 2, because of chapter 3, the value that it has. And so Stephen has listed here the part of the list of that. We'll get to all that in just a moment. So let's go to question number 2. What does the fear of the Lord have to do with departing from evil? Chapter 3, verse 7. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. All right. All right. That's true. Anything else? Absolutely. Let's define the fear of God. We're going to see fear throughout the book of Proverbs, not like you do, say, in Deuteronomy, or like you see in Psalm 34, and Psalm 33, Psalm 34 particularly. But you're going to see fear scattered throughout the book of Proverbs. What does fear mean when it talks about the fear of God, fearing God?
Reference to God and respect.
All right? Let's come back to that. I've often made this analogy that fear is like the two sides of a coin. The coin has a heads and a tails, doesn't it? They are distinct, but they're also inseparable. You can't take them. You can't say, well, I want quarters, but I want the heads. You keep the tails. You take one, you take the other side. On the one side of fear, it involves awe and respect for God, standing in awe of His majesty, His power, and His might. That's part of fear. What's the other side of the coin of fear? Yeah, being fearful of His judgment, being afraid of the judgments of God, that I am afraid of of violating the will of God. So, let's go back to our text. The fear of the Lord is to depart from evil. How does the fear of the Lord cause me, and Stephen's already hinted at this, but I want us to get this point. How does the fear of the Lord cause me to depart from evil?
You can't serve both. You can't serve God and mammon. You'll either serve one, hate the other one, or you'll serve the opposite.
Okay.
You can't serve two masters.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, if I truly am in awe of God, I'm going to do whatever He says. If I'm afraid of His judgment, I'm also going to live right and depart from evil. Let's go to question 3, verses 21 to 26, same text. Proverbs 3 is about safety that comes with wisdom. What are some things you learn about safety from those verses?
The Lord will be your confidence. Don't be afraid. Keep sound wisdom and discretion. They will be before your soul.
All right. Anything else? That's good.
Well, if you have faith in the Lord and trust Him, then there's no need to fear. Because if you have God on your side, who can be against you?
All right. Very good.
You also know what a dangerous path is.
Right.
What a dangerous path.
Wisdom will show you what's dangerous and what is the safe path. And so therein is safety. We'll come back to that. All right, let's see what happens in Proverbs 3. Let's start with verses 1 to 12. This is what the Lord gives to those who seek wisdom. We just came out of chapter 2 where you're to seek after wisdom, go after it like mining for some treasure. And those who do that, here's what the Lord gives to them. So let's start listing here in verses 1 to 12. Because this is a survey, we're going to hit the high points. We're not going to get every detail. Notice, though, in verse 1, again in verse 3, this idea of do not forget my law, do not let your heart keep my commands. Verse 3, let not mercy and truth forsake you, bind them around your neck, etc. So here's the idea of just holding on to wisdom, holding on to the will of God. And here's the result. First of all is a long life. Now, that's quite interesting because for a length of days and long life and peace will be added to you. That's a repeated principle through the Psalms. If you care to take note of that, we're not going to trace them all. We'll see it again in verse 16. We see it again in 4 and 10. We see it again in 9 and 11. We see it again in 10 and 27 and 14 and 27 and 15 and 24. There are just numerous texts through the Psalms that there's longevity of life with wisdom. Seek God, follow God, and there's... Well, that reminds us of Exodus 20 and in verse 12. In the giving of the Ten Commandments, God had made the point that you honor and father and mother, that your days may be long upon the land. So what does all that suggest to you? Is it saying that if your life is not long, you didn't have wisdom? Is it possible for those who are wise to have a brief life? Sure it is. So what's this talking about? Lang suggests that it has reference to earthly prosperity. That it is not suggesting by that you are guaranteed a long life. I don't think any of these texts suggest that. Colin Daly suggests that it's a life of peace that is free of disturbance, is really what's being described, and that there seems to be a synonymous concept between length of days and the peace will be added to you. I'm not sure about that, but I think it's the same concept that you see in Ephesians 6 and in verse 3, that following after peace more likely promotes longevity of life. Does that make sense? Rather than a guarantee of longevity of life. Because there's some wicked people who live to be old. There's some righteous people who die young. It's not saying, and these are general principles, by the way. So it is not saying you're guaranteed longevity of life if you follow after wisdom. It is saying principles of wisdom are more conducive to longevity of life and the enjoyment of life than wickedness. Does that make sense? I don't know what else to do with that. Let's go ahead and begin listing some of the rest of these because we're going to get behind. He mentions peace, this tranquility of life that comes if you seek after wisdom. Show me somebody that is just in a torment all the time. They have no peace at all, and most likely that person doesn't have the wisdom you find in the Scriptures. Show me someone that no matter what comes their way, they seem to be at peace. And I'll show you somebody that has wisdom. Verse 4 mentions the favor of God, that he shall find favor, and the New King James says high esteem. That high esteem, if you look at your footnote, will say good understanding. The NET translates that, which is a more wooden translation, understanding. I think that fits the context because of what we see at verse 5, for what that may be worth to you. So in verse 4 and 5 and 6, one of the things you seek wisdom, you're going to get good understanding. And so then the next thing he says is, don't lean on your own understanding. In other words, you seek wisdom, you don't need to have your own wisdom. You don't need to be brilliant yourself. Just lean upon the wisdom of God, and then you have good understanding. And then what will he do? Verse 6. He will direct your paths for you. Now, in verses 7 and 8, health is promised. This is not a health and wealth gospel, but it is suggesting that following wisdom, generally, like longevity of life, promotes better living. Many of the diseases that come with premarital and extramarital and perverted sexual relationships are because people didn't follow after wisdom. Make sense? The life of drugs is in contrast to following after wisdom. But be that as it may, do not be wise in your own eyes. Here's pride. Fear the Lord and depart from evil, and it will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. You'll live a better, enjoyable life in following after wisdom. Verse 9 and 10, what does he promise? Yeah, God will richly bless you. It is not a health and wealth gospel. What do I mean by health and wealth gospel? You hear that? People say that this guy on television is preaching a health and wealth gospel. Yeah, if you follow after God, you're going to be rich and you're going to be healthy. If you're not rich and not healthy, you're not following after God, which really means you're not sending us the donation. You send us the donation and God's going to richly bless you. So the more you send, the more you're going to be rich. That's what the health and wealth gospel is about. This is not what that is. It is simply saying at verse 9 and 10 that if you honor God and you follow after God, God's going to richly bless you. I want to go back to verse 9. Honor God with your possessions. How do you do that? I need to honor God with my mind. I need to honor God with my tongue. I need to honor God in the way that I live. But he said, honor God with your possessions.
Benevolence by helping
All right.
other Christians in need, or showing.
All right, that's one way. Benevolence would be one way. I help those in need. I'm honoring God with my possessions. What else?
Be good stewards. Don't be wasteful.
Good. Don't be wasteful. Be good stewards of what we have. Honor God with my possessions.
Being thankful for what you got.
All right. Show appreciation for what we have, which is part of stewardship that we talked about. What else?
If you were in business, to be a good businessman. Be honorable with your business.
Yeah.
How you deal with your customers.
Yeah, how I gain my possessions, I honor God. And then God's going to bless us richly. And then notice in verses 11 and 12, what God gives those who seek wisdom, he gives them loving correction. Now this is interesting because he said, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor detest his correction. You see, wisdom, if I seek after the wisdom of God, it is not always going to be pleasant. Does that make sense? Because the wisdom of God may be correcting to me. It may be like a chastening. I may get from God what seems like a spanking. For whom he loves, he corrects, just as the Father does his Son. Where's that quoted in the New Testament? Hebrews 12, yeah. And in that context, verses 5 and 6, it is in the context of dealing with persecution. It was called a chastening of the Lord. How do I know? Because the context mentions God scourges every son he receives, which is a description of persecution. But God gives loving correction. So this is what God gives to those who seek wisdom. Here, let's get the overall point. The point is there's value in wisdom. And here's part of the value that we get from wisdom. Now then, the second thing he shows is that wisdom is of more value than silver and gold. Now, he makes 3 points here. And verse 13 is quite interesting. And I want to note the same phrase at verse 18. At verse 13, if you have the New King James, it'll use the word happy. The English Standard, many of you will use the word blessed. Drop to verse 18. Happy are those who retain her. The English Standard is going to use this word blessed. Both are proper translations of that. This word is translated multiple times by the word blessed. It is translated multiple times by the word happy. Muntz's expository dictionary, that's more of a lexicographer, that's not an English dictionary, says that the word can mean blessed, can mean happy, a heightened state of happiness. I take it that the word means he is happy because he is blessed. Does that make sense? So the person who seeks after wisdom is happy because he has wisdom. He's blessed because he has wisdom. This brings true happiness. You want to be happy in life? Seek after wisdom. This brings true happiness. A heightened state of happiness, not an external kind of happiness. Now, here's her value. This is this woman personified, and here's what she's offering. There's nothing compares to what she has to offer. So he says, at verse 13 and 14, for her proceeds are better than silver and gold, and all the things that you may desire cannot compare with her. In other words, whatever you desire, you say, I would love to have, and you picture something that's very expensive. You can't afford it. And I'd love to have that. Whatever you can desire, it doesn't compare with what wisdom has to offer. Does that make sense? You say, well, I would love to be a millionaire, I'd love to be a billionaire. That doesn't compare with wisdom. I'd love to have the biggest house in the world. It doesn't compare with wisdom. Make sense? All right, here's what else she offers. Verse 16, we've already talked about the significance, so we won't spend any time. She offers length of days, verse 16, but that's not all. That's in one hand. In other words, this woman is standing here, she's offering you length of days, if you just come and gain wisdom. And in the other hand, what does she have? Riches and honor. True riches and honor, as well as material blessings. You come and seek wisdom, have length of days, riches and honor. Offering both. What else does she offer? Verse 17. Say again. Yeah. She has this pleasantness and peace. You want true peace? You're going to find it with following after wisdom. Then notice in verse 18, she's a tree of life. She's the source of life and the source of happiness that we saw in 13 and in 18. And so she's described as this tree of life. She gives life now, and she leads you to eternal life. And so she leads you to life. Then notice verses 19 and 20. I think the point here is, it seems like the writer has just jumped gears on us. And that transition is not real smooth in my first cursory reading of that. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth, and by understanding established the heaven, and by his knowledge the depths are broken up and the clouds drop down like dew. And you say, I thought we were talking about what wisdom can do for us, and then it talks about God and his wisdom. I think it's showing the power of wisdom. That seems to be the point to me. That in the context of the value of wisdom, here's what it can do for you, Here's what God did with his wisdom. So you seek after his wisdom. So how powerful is this wisdom I need to be seeking after? Well, I'll tell you what God did with it. He founded the earth and established the heavens, and the depths are broken up, and the clouds drop the dew from heaven. All by the wisdom of God. You want some wisdom? Here's the power it has. Make sense? That makes sense rather than it seemingly an abrupt changing of gears there. Now let's talk about this safety that comes. One of the things that sells us on a product, if you're a Facebook user and you know how the ads come up and you click on the ad because you were interested, and then you get 100 more of those same ads from 100 different companies. And one of the things that we're interested in is if an ad comes up, is this makes my life safer. Does that make sense? We're interested in safety. I'll be safer. I'll be protected if I buy this product. Well, here's what wisdom is saying. You'll be safer. For example, look at verse 22. So they will be, you take the principles of truth and grace your neck with them, and they're going to be life to your soul. You're going to have life. Verse 23, you'll be able to walk and not stumble. Does that mean if I'm walking after God that there's the impossibility of apostasy? No. But when I stumble, finish my sentence. When I stumble, it's because I've quit listening to wisdom. Make sense? As long as I'm listening to wisdom, I'm not stumbling. I don't want to stumble. I don't want to fall. All right? There's no reason, verse 24, you'll not be afraid, and do not be afraid of sudden terror, nor trouble of the wicked when he comes. What does it mean there's not going to be any fear? All right, I know the Lord's on my side. In the context with the value of wisdom, if I'm following after wisdom, much of the things I fear are not going to happen. Number one. Number two, when problems do come, with wisdom, I'm going to know more how to handle those. Am I not? All right, absolutely. Leaning upon the Lord's His understanding, and He will direct you. His ways will direct you. Very good. There's going to be sweet sleep. How is that true? Your conscience, okay. I'm not worried about life. I don't go to bed fretting and worrying about tomorrow because I'm leaning on God's understanding and I'm seeking His wisdom. And so I have nothing to really disturb and bother my sleep. And I'm going to have confidence, verse 26. The Lord will be your confidence and keep your foot from being caught. All right. Let's talk about the blessings and the grace and the glory that come from God. Here's some things don't do. And he lists 4 of those. Number 1, don't withhold good. By the way, in chapter 3, we start seeing some imperatives. King develops this more in a very thorough fashion, and I don't have time to go through all of his. He does an excellent job of that. Of the imperatives that start in chapter 3 and how they're grouped together. But be that as it may, don't withhold good. What's the point of verse 27 and 28 when it's within your power and your hand to do? Here's something I owe, I need to pay it. Here is some good that I can do, don't withhold it. Do the good. And so don't withhold good. Don't say when it's in your hand to do something, tell your neighbor, tomorrow, come back and I'll do that. You do it now. So don't withhold good. Secondly, don't devise evil against your neighbor. Thirdly, don't strive without a cause. If he's done you no harm, don't start a fight. Don't start a problem. Don't start a quarrel when there's no reason for it. And then don't envy the oppressor. How would you envy the oppressor? The one doing wrong, the one doing sin, the one doing evil. Covet his material gains. I could be envious of his power, wished I had his power. I could be envious of his influence, wished I had his influence. Don't be envious of the evildoer. in any shape, form, or fashion. Here's some don'ts. Good point. Good point. Very close, good connection. Then 32 to 35, and I know this is kind of heard, but we want to get to Proverbs 4, and that is the righteous have God's approval and blessing, and the wicked do not. By the way, verse 34, let's get 33. The curse of the Lord is on the house of the wicked, and he blesses the habitation of the just. 33. I said 34, but that's verse 33. In other words, God blesses the righteous and he condemns wicked. Verse 34, he scorns the scornful and gives grace to the humble. That's quoted in James and in 1 Peter in the context of humility, developing humility. God resists the proud, but quoted here as saying he scorns the scornful. The scornful is equated with the proud. All right, questions or comments on Proverbs 3? Good point. Yeah, the value of wisdom has to do with the legacy we leave behind. What are we going to be remembered for? What do we remember others for, was her comment. Was it what they did, what they had left behind, their wealth, or is it how they lived and the wisdom they had? Good point. All right, let's go to Proverbs 4. Proverbs 4 is, I call it for my purpose, wisdom is the principal theme, based upon verse 7, that wisdom is the principal theme. So, let's go to question 4. Why is that statement true? Or how is that statement true? All right, that's true. Good point. Good point. Let me illustrate it this way. If you have wealth, forget wisdom, suppose you could pick one of several things that's being offered to you today. One of them is wealth, whatever amount you want. And that's what you chose. You've got wealth. What can you do with that wealth? Buy anything you want. You can help others. But now you don't have wisdom. You just got wealth. That's what you chose. So I can buy anything I want. My health is bad. Can I buy health? No, that ain't going to help. When I want to depart from evil, is that money going to help me depart? No, it doesn't help me. It may get me in more trouble. When I don't want to know the direction I need to go and the direction of life and what's right, is my money going to tell me? No. Maybe that's not the most invaluable thing. Here's another choice you've got. You can have health, but you can't have wisdom and health and money at the same time. And you say, boy, I'd love to have good health. Okay, got great health. Now what can you do with your health? I can work, make money, so I can get a little of that. Does that health help you in time of trial? No, it's not going to help me know what's right and wrong. Well, we've got another choice. We can choose wisdom. But we may not have health and we may not have wealth, but I've got wisdom. Is it going to help me in any circumstance? Yeah. When I'm down, when I'm up, when I'm sick, when I'm healthy, when I'm working, when I'm not, it's going to affect my home, it's going to affect my worship, it's going to affect my relationships, it's going to affect every aspect, my attitude. You see, wisdom affects everything in life. It is the principal thing. Does that make sense? It affects every aspect of life. He illustrates that here in the context. So let's look at verses 1 to 7 of getting wisdom and getting understanding. Talks about getting wisdom. And so I wanted to hit some of the high points here of going after wisdom. Notice at verse 2, the sources of wisdom. One is, he mentions, do not forsake my law. In other words, the word and verse 4 as well would be the source. But also verse 3 and 4, one source of wisdom is listening to not only to God, but listening to your father and your mother. Parental instruction has a lot to do with learning from your father and mother. And then when he talks about wisdom as a principal thing, therefore get wisdom, don't forsake wisdom. Listen to parental instruction. Now here's a very practical thing. Quite often we don't want to listen to parents. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, as we often say, that the young people are the ones who need to hear this. But often young people don't want to listen to parental instruction, and yet the wisest of all men writes a book and said, I listened to my parents. So I want to be wise, but I'm not going to listen to my parents. The wisest, Solomon said, I listened to my parents. I listened to mine. I paid attention. And I listened to them. And that's part of where my wisdom came from. So his point in verses 1 to 7 is get wisdom because, verse 7, it's the principal thing. And here's why you need to get wisdom. Make sense? All right. Now notice at verse 3. I think his point is about when I was my father's son, tender and the only one inside of my mother. I think he's saying be like the young person who is impressionable and gain wisdom. You know how a child is impressionable? They want you to teach them. They want you to tell them. They want to learn until they get to a certain age and then they know it all. And so be like that tender child who is impressionable. I want to learn. I want wisdom. Can you help me with wisdom? Can you teach me wisdom? Show me where wisdom is. Make sense? All right. Now let's talk about how wisdom will adorn you. What do you see in verses 8 through 10? All right. You will have honor and respect. I think this harmonizes what we see in 1 Peter 3, the outward adorning of the person. Sometimes we give great emphasis to how we look, how our hair is fixed, how we dress, our clothes, and we want to look attractive. Nothing wrong with that. But here's an inward beauty. You want to be a real knockout, then adorn yourself with wisdom, and you'll be attractive to all. That's the point. Wisdom will promote you, will honor you, and will deliver you. Here's what wisdom will do for you. She will bring honor when you embrace her, and she will place on your head an ornament of grace and a crown, and she will deliver you. In other words, she'll crown you with honor. You just pay attention to wisdom. And verses 11 to 13, notice this, that wisdom is your life. That when you walk in her path, will not be hindered. Looking for verse 13. Here we go. Verse 13, take firm hold of instruction. Do not let go. Keep her, for she's your life. In other words, you can't live without her. And so here is this woman wisdom. I can't live without her. I've got to have her. I've got to have wisdom in my life. She's my life. She adorns me. She makes me attractive. She puts a crown on my head. And if I appear like some royal king, it's because wisdom is with me. This is what she did for me. Makes sense? Can't live without her. Now let's get 14 to 19 here. And let's see, we've got time to go to this question. Number 5. Verses 14 to 19 of chapter 4 is about not walking with the wicked. List any points that you see here. What do you see in 14 to 19 about don't go with the wicked? We saw this in chapter 1, by the way. All right, stay away. They'll keep you in trouble. What else? All right. All right, good point. All right, let's see 3 things here. These are good. 3 things I've got listed here. First of all, avoid them. Do not enter the path of the wicked, nor walk in the way of evil. Avoid it. Do not travel on it. Turn away from it and pass on. We're going to see more about that in Proverbs 5, by the way, verse 8. You want a clue? We'll see more in chapter 7, beginning in verse 15. We saw this in Psalm 1 in verse 1. What he's saying is avoid the wicked. Don't go down their path. Avoid it. Notice, don't go down their path. Just don't do the same thing. Or mix and mingle with them. Just don't do. No. No. Avoid it. Do not travel on it. Turn away and do not pass. And pass on. Now here's the reason for it. Here's the danger. 16 and 17. Paraphrase verse 16 saying they don't sleep until they've done evil. They had rather do evil than eat or sleep. So don't spend time with them. Avoid wickedness. Avoid being around the wicked. They eat violence. Some suggest they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. I think it's a figure of speech. Some think that it means that they get their meals by violence. I don't think that's it. I think it's more, it's like they're consuming violence. They love violence and they love sin and they love wickedness. It's like they eat it. They eat and drink and sleep and everything with violence. They just, in wickedness. They just love it. And they're not going to sleep till they've done more. Now then, verses 18 and 19 show a contrast. Let's quickly get this and then I won't look at the last section. The contrast is that look at verse, what are we looking for? Verse 18. The path of the just is like the shining sun that shines even brighter into a perfect day. What is that saying? The just and the righteous are on a path that just gets brighter and brighter. The wicked, verse 19, are on a path that gets darker and darker. So if you have a choice of going down a path and you say this one has got brightness on it and it just gets brighter as it goes on, or this one gets dark and it gets darker as it goes on, which one do you want? Which road do you want to travel? And I think I want that one with the light. Well, then that's wisdom. Follow after wisdom. All right. Now then, verses 20 to 27, wisdom is life and health. I'll just quickly get this, and I want to focus on verse 23. We have a question about that. 20 to 27 is just simply saying wisdom brings you life, brings you health. Here's part of that value of that we talked about in chapter 3. Let's get a sampling of that. Verse 21, do not let it depart from your eyes. Verse 22, for they are life to those who find them in health in all their flesh. That summarizes that section. Now here's why. Verse 23, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Let's get question 6. Question 6. What's that verse mean?
Kind of application is put a guard around it, make sure that you're not opening up your heart to things perverted, corrupted, lead it in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. What else? What'd you put to question 5? Stephen's right. Absolutely. It's going to get worse and worse. In the Bible, these are good comments. In the Bible, the term heart refers to the mind of man. So keep and it's not the blood pump. It has to do with your mind. This is the Bible heart. So keep your mind focused, keep it clear, keep it in context with the book of Proverbs, feeding on wisdom. Keep your heart with all. Be careful what you think, for out of your thinking comes everything we do. Every action I take, every word I utter comes from my heart and my mind. Does that make sense? So a corrupt mind is going to have corrupt actions, corrupt words. A pure mind has pure actions and pure words. Keep your heart with all diligence. Make sure you're careful what goes in, what you feed your mind with, because out of it comes everything you do. Matthew 15 is case in point. 2 questions quickly. We've got about a minute and we're done. Let's go to question 8. What conclusions do you draw about wisdom from these 2 chapters? What do you walk away with and say, hey, this is what I learned? Very good. Very good.
And I put down, it can be found and it can also be lost.
Yes, that's a good point. Just because someone has wisdom and following it doesn't mean they're always going to. Good point. These are good observations. Question number 7. What would you list as the most memorable, what verse would you list as most memorable from this study? It's going to vary from, it's interesting. What stood out? Get understanding. Anybody else? Yeah, chapter 3, 5, and 6. Wisdom is the principal thing, verse 7. Chapter 5 next time, and 6. 5 and 6 next time.